Aceasta
With us is Andrei Codrescu, Romanian poet, essayist, author, and regular commentator on NPR's All Things Considered. Codrescu was born and raised in Transylvania, Romania, and was expelled from the University of Bucharest in 1965 during the repressive regime of Nicolae Ceausescu, the dictator who was killed by the people during the upheaval in Romania last year. He's lived in the United States since. Currently, he's the editor of a journal called The Exquisite Corpse, and he teaches at Louisiana State University. Joining Mr. Codrescu is the internationally known columnist for The Nation, Washington editor for Harper's, and book reviewer for Newsday, Christopher Hitchens.
Freedom or death. The qualities of human survival that are needful in a country which has known every variety of despotism, every variety that's been road tested within living memory, are these: the ironic, the skeptical, the raucously incredulous, the openness to the fantastic. And my new friend Andrei is a fine exemplar of these qualities, as you'll shortly hear and shortly see. Romania Libera, it's sad to say, is still a country of the imagination. But sad as it is to think of Romania Libera, free Romania, as still a country of the imagination, we can console ourselves with the thought that in countries of the imagination, people like Andrei can be part of the provisional government, even if they're always teetering on the verge of resignation. So, forward, Andrei, please. May we close the curtains. And, ladies and gentlemen, I wish I was in your shoes and was meeting him for the first time. Thank you.
Well, our first poet was in exile, so ever since, in a kind of reciprocal gesture, Romania has been sending all their poets out. It's our main export. Of course, for years I just thought of myself as American, until this Romania burst into my consciousness and everyone else's. And so now I'm Romanian once more. My horrible stepfather, who was an engineer and whose only pleasure in life was building amateur radios, used to spend every weekend at his workshop table inventing. He invented a phone radio, a clock radio, a butter churn radio, and a mailbox radio, long before these things became common. So proud was he of his radios that he punished anyone who didn't show the proper degree of amazement before them. Once he beat me for writing dirty words on the world map that hung over his workshop table. He didn't beat me because the words were dirty, but because dirty words distracted him from his radios. One day I removed a small piece from inside his latest creation. It took him several cursing days to find out what was wrong. From that time on, I took a little piece out of whatever he was working on every time I chanced by his table. He became horribly moody and had big fights with my mother. He beat me whenever he could lay his hands on me, which wasn't often. I was too quick and he was too depressed. Finally, one day he packed his radios and his bags and he left us. My mother cried, but it was a great day for me. And now that I have become a little piece in the radio myself, I often wonder if I am not the very first piece that I removed from my horrible stepfather's radio. And whenever somebody says, I heard one of your radio pieces, a piece of radio comes back to me, removed by little fingers from a mean man's sole pleasure in life.
When you went back to visit your native country, and I know that you've been an American for many years and you consider yourself an American, How did you respond to what was going on there?
Well, the first time I felt the euphoria that everyone else was feeling there about the end of the Ceausescu's, and I felt emotions that haven't been repeated since, particularly since I've gone back the second time in July, and both the atmosphere and the country seemed quite different to me, and the euphoria had turned to anger. I think what's happened there recently, though, was probably the greatest staged play of the end of this century, and they are descendants of the Romans for a good reason. It was a play with real bodies, that it was done on a scale that I don't think it's been seen anywhere else, and quite scripted.
Now, among the many great Romanian names of the century is that of Ionescu. And did you, if you had to say which play you were in from Ionescu, which scenario would you like to compare it with?
Well, you know, I've thought about this for a while, and I think that it is parts of the rhinoceros, parts of the rhino were in this play. There are also parts of others, including the bald soprano, but it had other more tragic levels that I think that UNESCO didn't quite get to. So I would say that the Romanian Revolution was scripted by UNESCO, but also by Beckett in some ways. Of course, the reason I had a stepfather at all is because my real father, Stalin, died when I was a child, and it was a traumatic event in my life, as it was in the life of many other people of my generation born in that part of the world. And it's the question that one asks, the way people ask in the United States, where were you when John Kennedy was shot? People say, where were you when Stalin died? Nobody dies like Stalin did. He didn't just die, he took the world with him. My world, at any rate. I was 8 years old. At school, all the kids had been crying, and I'd been crying the most. For us, Stalin was that saintly, fatherly figure that smiled from above, surrounded by adoring children. For me personally, he was father, pure and simple, because I didn't have one of my own. On my little nightstand table, I had his portrait, and I slept securely under the shadow of his mustache. Devastated, disbelieving, I came home from school through the back alleys, hiding my tears from everyone. When I got home, I saw my stepfather and another man sitting soberly at the kitchen table. I slipped into the room and hid, too upset to talk. I'm glad the son of a bitch is dead, the man said, and my stepfather concurred. My world was there and then shattered forever. Later, I watched people cry and tear their hair publicly on the streets, but I somehow knew that it was all a show. They were just using the occasion to grieve, weep, and cry for other sorrows. Stalin was just an excuse to mourn for the world. And I suspected fraud about the whole race of fathers, leaders, and men larger than life. There are no fathers, I decided, only mustaches which scatter in the wind, hair by hair, which vanish, disappear, betray, and leave you alone at night. I met a task correspondent in Sibiu, in my hometown. We got drunk, we had a bottle of vodka, and he said, I was in Timișoara.
You get drunk on one bottle of vodka?
Well, the two of us did okay, because the local brew was serving as a background for this.
Right.
Because we drank quite a bit of Tsuika and some wine, too.
He was new to task, presumably.
I think that's all he had. Maybe he kept his stash for someone else, but it was enough. One of the things he said was that in Timișoara on the 10th of December, and I said, Timișoara on the 10th of December, what were you doing in Timișoara on the 10th of December? None of this business happened until the 15th. And then he winked.